Something like that.
Well, what's your official title?
Technology Information Specialist.
Technology Information Specialist. You work with both ITAC.
You could just say I work with ITAC in the library, or I work in the library. That's my MO. So I'm actually going to show up my email inbox.
You're pretty brave.
I know. Actually, everything I'm going to show is going to be exposing
Your entire life.
my entire life.
Yeah.
And actually not just my life, but everyone else I know.
That's cool.
So,
You're not going to get me to do that.
so there it is. I mean, I think it's all public. Anyway.
That's probably true.
So
My life has more mileage. I'm good? We're good.
So what are we going to do with that mic?
I think we're tossing the mic back and forth, right? Okay. So I guess we're tossing it back and forth. Information technology. Coordinator?
Technology information specialist.
Technology information specialist.
I would just stick with work I take. I mean, that title's not very descriptive anyway, right?
Well, it is amazingly descriptive. It just doesn't say anything.
Well, that's what I mean. Describe it.
Okay. Information technology specialist. See, that just never even sits in my head.
Technology information.
Technology information. Yeah, it would be.
I actually have two titles. I think I'm a coordinator too of some sort.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for our final session of the Instructional Design and Technology Roundtables. My name is Ben Ward. I'm one of the instructional designers with ITAC, formerly with OME. And joining me is Kevin Champion, who works both with ITAC and Hale Library. He's a technology information specialist, which we've discussed how much this really doesn't say. But he does many, many wonderful things. He's also got somewhere a coordinator title on top of all that. And we're going to take you along on a strange journey of basically both of our experience with social media. Kevin hit it just right, and I think he's kind of grown up with it. And I, on the other hand, have a profession that promotes tech addiction, and I have been an unrepentant tech addict for over a decade. So, yeah, I clock more hours on a computer than is healthy, and I know it. So I've been part of it also, but just from a different point of view. So I think you're going to get an interesting kind of play back and forth between the two of us as we discuss and share things. And we're hopefully going to keep this very open and informal and social. So anytime any of you have a question, don't hesitate to throw up an arm or interject something on out. And you probably should expect that Kevin and I will be doing that back and forth, and we probably won't always agree. And a lot of that will have very little to do with what we're talking about. It will have more to do where we come from in our lives, because social experiences are very much an individual thing. With that, I think I'm going to drop off. Is there anything you'd like to say right off the beginning?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. As you can see, we're going to be passing the mic back and forth, so there'll be a little bit of pauses. So before we get started in showing kind of the concrete examples and taking you on this journey as Ben described it, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about social media as far as what is social media. So we have this word that we're using to describe things, but it's kind of vague of what it is. And then attached to what it is kind of why is it important? Like, why are we having this session here to talk about this thing that's so vague? So I just want to kind of provide a little short step-by-step logical summary of kind of why I see it as important and how it all kind of fits together. So I'm going to start out by positing that we know ourselves through our relations with others. So we know ourselves through our relations, and that's kind of obvious in the sense that like the labels that we would use to describe ourselves often are relational. So I would describe myself as a son as a boyfriend, as a partner, as a father. I would describe myself as all these things, and that's relational. So I know myself in relation to other people. But it also happens on kind of a more deep and existential level. So I think it was Charles Cooley, I think was his name, 1902, wrote a book and described a process that he kind of had discovered, which is that people tend to imagine how other people view them. So for instance, right now I'm imagining what you all out there are thinking of me, and then I place judgments on what I think you are thinking of me, and I use those judgments to form how I think of myself, okay? So this is kind of how I view myself in relation to other people. So then the second part about this is that our relations with others are mediated by media, and then connected to that is that anything that mediates relations can be considered media. So we could even consider the language I'm using English and the words I'm using here as a media. So I know myself through my relations with other people, and then these relations are mediated by the media, or the mediums that I use to convey them. So in this sense, in my mind, all media are inherently social because of this fact. So social media used to describe something is kind of redundant, I'd say. However, media are not neutral conduits of information. All media are biased. So they all have certain biases that allow them to perform certain tasks and do certain things in certain ways. And so the social media that we're talking about here, in the terms of the internet, in terms of new technology, are media that are inherently biased for sociality. And by that I mean they're biased for mass interaction. So instead of a one-way interaction that you might think of with television, let's say, or one-on-one with telephone, you might say this form of social media is about massive interaction. So all people being able to interact with all other people. And this creates this really rich, contextualized web of interactions. So the next point about this is that since we know ourselves through our relations with others, new media create new ways of knowing ourselves. So that's kind of the tie-in where I think this is important, because if it is the fact that we know ourselves through other people, and the fact that media mediate these relationships, then new media, when new media arise, the connection there is that they offer us new ways of knowing ourselves. And then further connecting it to what we're all here in large part to do, which is in this institution of teaching and learning, I'd say that learning itself is kind of about knowing ourselves better. So through the process of learning and striving hard, you come to find that you know something else that you didn't know before you started that process. And so then the last and final connection is that new media and social media in this instance offer us new ways of learning and thus new ways of teaching. So that's kind of a brief summary of what social media is in this context and why I think it's important, because it allows a whole new context and a whole new way of going about things. So with that, I think we're going to dive deep into the actual social media, and Ben's going to start out by showing us kind of how easy it is.
And that's part of the reason it's taken off. If you were a techie even 5 to 7 years ago, building a web page was a bit of a chore. In fact, using most of the web was a bit of a chore. And what's happened is the technology has reached a level of a certain degree of transparency. And all you really need is an email account and an internet connection, and off you go. So I was just going to kind of give a quick example. And truth of the matter being, I videotaped this, and there's a reason I videotaped this, and I'm just going to talk over it. This is one of the landmark blogger utilities out there for people who like to journal online. And you pretty much just go to the website and you hit create a blog, and you dump in an email address, and this will just kind of blink along as I talk, and then eventually I'll get impatient, because when I actually was setting this up, it was the middle of the night, 10:52 p.m.
Can you expand it to the wider view?
I'll go ahead and expand it to see if that helps any. That helps some.
Yeah.
Okay. But the reality of it is pretty much you just need an email address, and you enter in a password, and you have a display name. We'll go ahead and pull this up a little. You do your password. You put in your display name. As I said, I was going to get impatient with it. And then you do this thing that's called a CAPTCHA, where you verify that you're basically not a machine or a bot that's trying to create accounts in mass for the purpose of spamming and such. and spoofing. And so then you enter that in, you hit your continue. Oh, I dragged too far back. Then you name your blog, and give you the blog address. And as you'll notice that I immediately ran into some check availability problems. And this is something you're going to run into, and this is actually why I videotaped it, because you're missing the 5 to 7 minutes where I kept looking up for new names, because all the easier names have already been taken. And that happens a lot with any social media, is that a lot of it is being inundated by a lot of new users, not mentioning people like me who just create these little mock-ups that probably are only going to ever be used once. And then next time we do a presentation, we do another one, and you have to wonder how many of those are out there. So I go ahead and I come up with this, and ultimately it tells me this blog address is available. You click continue, you get to do your fun part, which is pick what it's going to look like. And once you pick one of your templates, you just hit continue, and then your blog is created. And the truth of the matter is, the hardest part in this entire process is naming your blog. After that, everything's flexible. Everything's pretty easy. You can go straight into your blog and start typing. Hi world, now I get to start blogging. And then you post or publish it. And it's out in the world. And it's that quick. And it's that easy. Now you can do this with wikis. You can do this with Facebook. Let's go ahead and see if I can escape out of full mode. And we'll go ahead and open up Facebook. WebPaint, which is equivalent to the same thing, except you're creating a wiki now instead of a blogger account. Before I go any further, this is one of those things as an instructional designer I'm supposed to always be doing, and I'm not really doing. I need to know where you all are at. How many of you know what a blog is right off the bat? Is anybody kind of lost with that, the idea of just journaling online, and that blogging software just makes it easier? How many of you know what a wiki is? This should be pretty evident also. Okay. And then I won't belabor the point. We're already there. This is pretty much the same thing. You create a site name. You describe it. You either open it up to everyone, including anonymous people, or you open it up to anyone who joins your site, but other people can read it, or you make it totally private. And then as you see, I ran into problems. Somebody already has IDTwetpaint.com. And so I had to come up with IDTKSU before it would let me continue on. Then you get to do the fun part, which is select a style or skin or template. Once you've done that, then you have to create an identity for yourself. Now, you probably noticed that it went pretty quickly with my Blogger account. The reason it may have gone a little quicker is because I was using a Gmail account. And behind the scenes, Blogger's actually owned by Google. So if you were signed into your Gmail account and then you go to Blogger, you're already halfway done right off the bat. With WebPaint, you don't have that back-end association. So you got to go ahead and create an identity for WebPaint. And this is a pretty standard wiki. I would encourage you all to go out to the instructional design website. That's at id.ome.ksu.edu. And look at some of the past roundtables, because just last month we had a whole panel of people teaching and using wikis professionally. And that's really well worth watching. And they're getting a lot of mileage out of a very simple Web 2.0 utility. Now, basically I'm giving it my address and everything. We come across yet one more CAPTCHA to prove that, in fact, I'm not a machine. Then I get to invite other people, so I invite myself. And because there's more than one of me out there, that's another thing you'll start discovering. And then I open it up, and wikis are so easy to start. The first time you sign in, it gives you all these tips on how to make a better wiki. But the truth is, you just hit your easy edit, and you start typing, and then you can tag it, and away you go. I'll move that out of there. So now I'm ready to make my first wiki entry, more to come later. Already done. Any questions? See, this is part of what's driving social media is you really don't need much. And that's the whole idea. You just need a desire to express yourself. And in fact, you don't even necessarily need a desire to express yourself publicly, because a lot of these utilities you can invite select people to and keep cloistered out of the real world.
Of course, what makes them social is the fact that, for instance, a wiki makes it so that you can have multiple people editing the same web page or the same set of web pages. And the same thing with a blog. A blog is inherently a social media, and it's probably one of the first examples of social media, primarily because of the comments that happen at the bottom of blog posts that, depending on how it's set up, people can go participate in the conversation that's happening around that medium.
And the truth of the matter is this isn't going to end. Things are going to get easier. And these are all going to start aggregating together, as you'll start seeing. Sean, you had a question?
How would you get people to participate in a wiki? I mean, that's a very tough question, and Clay Shirky wrote a book about how hard it is to sort of convert people from visitors to people who actually contribute.
Contribute and participate. Yeah, that you can drive a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Well, I mean, if you're a teacher, it's pretty easy. You just assign a point value.
Yeah.
I mean,
that works with great success. You'd be amazed. And that's worked a lot, as we saw last month. The other thing is you really kind of have to go out and farm yourselves advocates, people who want to contribute, people who are really desperately interested in what you've created, and get them started. You're trying to push for a critical mass, a point in which it sustains itself. And that's difficult. It really is. So at the beginning, you really kind of have to go out and champion your site to other people and really peddle it. Now with blogs, this is a little easier because you can start cross-linking to other blogs, and they figure out that you've linked to their blog, and before long you can get into this kind of whole social thing going on where it's give and take. You refer to somebody else's blog, they go read your blog, they think that's great, and they refer to yours later, and it gets some momentum going. Wikis are much harder. It's a little more of a sedate process, and it's a lot more work intensive for the contributors. And blogs are pretty much a one-man show, and the vast majority of them are just, for lack of a better way of putting it, vanity sites, somebody just journaling their own life. Not that that's a bad thing. It's probably a good thing in many ways. But the flip side is it's much easier to get something like a blog going than a wiki.
I think one of the keys to it is that in this environment, all information in the world is accessible in this environment, pretty much. And so if you're going to create something new, then it's a good idea to make sure that whatever you're creating is extremely specific. So, and in that realm, then in order to get people to participate in your wiki, or whatever the project is, you need to find the other people in the world out there who are extremely interested in this very specific thing that you're also extremely interested in. And in that, then there's this inherent reward of producing something that wasn't there before, that only a few people are extremely interested in, and all that. I mean, I think that's one of the keys that I find in reading people who talk about this kind of stuff, and in my experience.
And it doesn't hurt to be entertaining, truthfully.
Yeah.
If you've got a little yuck value in there, somebody chuckling at what you've written.
Okay, so blogs and wikis are like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I had a question about the blogger. I have a friend that has one on international education, and he posts every day. How do you remember to check things? I mean, is there a way to?
Yeah. Okay. So that's actually.
Have like a subscription thing or anything
Sure.
like that, but it's something that I'd be interested in knowing what he's posting about. But I don't remember.
Yeah, I'll show you that right now, right where we're going into. So blogs and wikis are mainstays of social media. They're first examples. Wikipedia, for instance, is about 8 or 9 years old. Blogs are about 9 or 10 years old. And that's, I mean, we're talking like 10 years ago, and that's light years in terms of this technology. And so what I'm going to take you into is using blogs and wikis are an integral part of it, but we're seeing a whole new, probably 2 or 3 new generations of social media that are emerging, and stuff that's just, a couple years old, stuff that's just been emerging this year, and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to kind of show you how all that works by taking you through how I navigate all of this social media. And the first thing to answer your question is that all blogs, and this is one of the most important fundamental aspects of social media, of Web 2.0, of all this stuff, is that all blogs have RSS feeds. Now, how many of you know what an RSS feed is? And how many of you use RSS feeds, I guess? Okay, so RSS feed basically takes the content of, do you know the URL for that blog?
No.
On the top of your head? Okay. So we'll just go to, let's go there. So we'll go to Infotech Tuesday, which is built on blog software and has an RSS feed. So the technology newsletter for Kansas State, and if you'll see up here in the browser, all browsers have an icon that's either this one or similar to it, and that's an icon for an RSS feed. An RSS feed is short for Real Simple Syndication, and so what it does is it takes the information from the blog and then it sends it out into the world. And so that's the thing that you can subscribe to in order to get the updates without having to go back to that website. However, in order to subscribe to this, you need something to subscribe to it with. And so that's where you have RSS readers. And there's a whole plethora of options out there for what reader you want to use. And you also have things called personal homepages or personal portals. And that's what I'm going to show you here, which is what's open in this tab. So this is what the RSS feed looks like for that blog here. And this is in code speak, basically. And so what you go here, and you could use one of these to subscribe to it using one of these services. Or if you have your own service that you already use daily, then you could use that and import that. And I'll show you how that kind of works. So this here is called netvibes.com. It's an example of a personal portal, as I just mentioned, or a start page. So this is the same thing where you would go in and you'd set up an account, and every time you come back to this page, you would log in, and then you get to set up your settings the way you want them. And so I say it's a start page because then you would come here, and this would be like your browser's homepage, let's say. Now, what's inside of NetVibes are primarily a bunch of RSS feeds. So this works as an RSS feed reader. So if we look here at these little boxes, most of them, like this one, is a feed from Reuters News. Okay, so I go up here and I hit add content, and then I add a feed, and I just copy the URL for that RSS feed, plug it in here, and then it'll add the feed to my NetVibes, and then it'll show up here. So what happens is this is updated automatically whenever something new is posted or published from that blog or from that website. So if I click on one of these headlines, it'll pull up this window, which will load the actual, in this case I've got it set to load the actual page. It can load just what the RSS feed gives you, which is usually just a short description. Or in NetVibes, you can go and click Show Website, and then you can see the actual article in the event that you were reading that article. So then also, as you can see, it makes the font kind of faint there, and then that's how you can keep track of what you've read and what you haven't read within NetVibes. Okay, so thus far with NetVibes, is there anybody who has any questions about the nuts and bolts of kind of what I'm talking about here? Yeah?
Another program is Snowflake. Do you know the study trends about just container bars and something?
In page flakes, you mean? Yeah. No, page flakes is very, very similar to NetVibes. Same thing, iGoogle is another one. And did you pass out those?
Yeah, there should be in the back.
Okay, so
name is another one that's on top of that. That's a lot of people use.
So those sheets they're basically just a list. It's not an exhaustive list, but a list of some of the services we'll be talking about today. And they're kind of categorized so you can see what services offer like things. So that's kind of how an RSS feed works. I'm going to actually start to where my homepage, where I would start, and where most of you probably start when you're on the internet, which is at your email. Okay. So I use Gmail, and this is an example of Gmail. And this is my start page and my homepage, and where I spend most of my time day to day because of the fact that it works as a communications hub for me. And one of the main reasons why is because it's got instant messaging integrated into actual Gmail. So I have my buddies over here on the right, and let's say I'm at work and I have a question for one of my colleagues, and they're also sitting at their computer. I can instant message them quickly, and they can get back with me on whatever it is. One of the benefits, too, is that it's not just instant messaging. It's actually, in Gmail, it has the possibility of doing both voice chat and video chat. So I can go in here, and I could start a video chat basically with someone on the fly, one of my buddies, and that would work if you had a camera, obviously, and a microphone to hook it up. So I don't use that frequently, but it's part of this kind of communications hub, as I would describe it. Another important part about this is that you can, through this interface, send an SMS. You can send an instant message, or not instant message, you can send a text to someone's cell phone. So let's say they're actually not online and they're out and about, but they got their BlackBerry with them or whatever, and I can send an SMS to them if I need, to communicate with them at that time, and all from this interface here. I don't have to be on my phone. And then likewise, they can get back to me. So, for instance, my partner Lindsay will be, I'll leave for the morning or whatever, and she'll be in class, and there was something that she needed to tell me that happened after I left or something. And so she can send an SMS from her text phone in class to me, and I'm on my computer all day, and it's much less disruptive for me to get it here in my inbox, in my email, than to have to deal with my phone and all that. So it's a way that we can communicate. So I use Gmail as, like I said, as a communications hub, and I also subscribe to a process that's called Inbox Zero. I don't know, this is kind of a personal productivity hack, and it's related to social media loosely. And so it basically just means that at all times I try to keep my inbox at 0, so I have no new messages in my inbox. And the reason why is because for me, my inbox for email is kind of, when I'm online, it's like an extension of my state of consciousness. So when my inbox is really full with lots of messages, I'm usually very stressed out because I've got a lot going on. And there's these different things, different messages that need to be done, and all this kind of stuff. And so I find that I can have more serenity in my life when my inbox has nothing in it. And the way I managed to do this is not just by being there all the time and filtering everything and responding to everybody all the time. It's by setting it up in a way that it filters things for me. So in Gmail, you can do this in any email client. I have it set up so that I have complex filters in place that when I receive an email from somebody or some group of people, it gets immediately processed and put into a certain location, so then I can attend to it when I'm ready to attend to it. So for instance, I have 2 different jobs, one in the library and one in ITAC. And I get email from both of those, and they're separate, separate entities. And I like to keep it separate, otherwise it's very confusing about how many hours I've spent in each job. And you all experience this even if you don't have 2 jobs, when you have your home life and you have your life at work and you might have your life with friends and all that. And you probably also, a lot of you have multiple email addresses. So you can feed all the email addresses into one client, and then you can have it filter all those out. And so, for instance, over here on the left, I have labels set up. And so here's my library label, and I've got 3 emails pending in my library label, and that's, when I go to work in the library, then I'll go check all that. So this is kind of, like I said, a productivity hack, but I thought I'd want to mention it here because I find that it's one strategy for actually handling all of this stuff that comes at us, and there's just tons of it, and if we don't come up with a strategy, then we just get buried by it all. So going back over to NetVibes, this is kind of my second home when I'm online, and whenever I log in to a computer, I'll log into both Gmail and to NetVibes. One of the important parts about it is that exact fact. So this allows me to be really flexible because I don't have to worry about what computer I'm on and what settings are set up on that computer. This is all in the cloud, so to speak. So it's all out there in these services. These settings are saved there, my email's saved there, and all that. And so I'm very flexible about what computer. For instance, this is not my computer. And yet I could sit down and be completely 100% effective, working, doing whatever I wanted to do because of these services. And these services are social media. So going back to NetVibes here, you'll see I have multiple tabs set up. And you can do this, and they just work like different pages. So I have feeds organized by the type of information in them. So for instance, in my tech tab, I have a lot of technology news feeds, and this is where I get a lot of information about Web 2.0 and social media, which is why I'm informed, which is why I can come here and talk about it, basically, because I have this, and so then I know when new things are coming out and what's going on in that world. I have one here, which is for blogs that my friends write, and so this is an example of subscribing like I described earlier. And I also have another one here, which is using a bunch of other social media and integrating it into NetVibes. So for instance, here we have one widget, which is what I would use to describe this little box. This is for Facebook, and this is feeding all my information from my friends in Facebook into my NetVibes. So this makes it so that I'm not actually going out to Facebook, almost never go out to Facebook, because that information is coming in here. Yeah?
Procedure. Can you make it really larger to move the cart a little farther away or something? You can't really see it or blur.
Yeah. Can you mess with it? I don't know. I was trying to earlier, but I couldn't get it to be any bigger. So.
Or your father, then you can make it larger. The card is.
That's better. Okay, so I hope my friends will forgive me because this is exposing you all to all of my personal life. I tried to kind of censor a little bit before I decided to put this up there, but one of the things about this is that this is all live happening right now. So this is constantly being updated, so I can't really tell what's going to be here when I show it to you. So this is my feed from Facebook, and I'm getting information from my friends. This is my feed from Twitter, which is another service I'm going to talk about here in a moment. And this is also being updated constantly, information from my friends on Twitter. And this is all within NetVibes. And I'll show you one more tab, which is most of those were through widgets or RSS feeds. You can also in NetVibes set up so that it just opens a whole web page if you want to. So this is further making it so that you can just go to one place, and then that can be kind of your hub for everything that happens when you're online. So here, FriendFeed, which is another service I'm going to tell you about, I just basically plug FriendFeed in as a web page into this page, so then I don't have to have a new tab open or a new window open to go check FriendFeed. It's right here within my NetVibes. So going back, I'm going to talk about dig.com, which is under social news. How many of you have heard of Dig before? Okay, so that's good. So we're about half of you said you've heard of Dig. And Dig's about 5 years old, so it's maturing to a level where it's been around. It's kind of a mainstay of social media. So if we go to Dig, the whole concept behind Dig is that it's social news. So anyone can submit an article or some other website, basically, to this service, and then individual users of the service can vote for or dig that article. And what ends up happening is through that process, you get kind of a socially filtered newsfeed coming at you. So instead of the mainstream media deciding what's important and what news should be out there, this is kind of the way that the people can decide for themselves through this process of voting. And this was a real revelation for social media, for the internet, for all that. So you see here is the feed of basically the most popular articles right now. Any questions about Dig? Okay. So the next thing, which you probably heard about because it's really becoming very popular now, is called Twitter. Twitter is basically it's a micro-blogging service, and what that means is that you have 140 characters to write your post, and it's all oriented towards interacting well with SMS, with text messaging, which is the reason why the character limit is so low at 140 characters. And this is also why it's become so popular, because it ends up being a social network that extends onto your phone very simply through text messaging, so that people can update their Twitter status using their phone, but they can also subscribe to people's Twitter feeds and get information from their friends on their phone. They don't have to be sitting on a computer all day. So like I said, after you have an account at Twitter, you log in, and then you have this box here, and you got 140 characters that you could say something to the world. And there are a multitude of different things you could say. You could be just telling people about what you ate for breakfast and what you did that day or whatever. But you could also be sharing information. You could be sharing links. You could be asking questions of people. And the way this all works is that you have followers. You have followers, and then you have people that you're following. So you can find people, and then you follow them, and then that subscribes. You subscribe to them, and then whenever they update it, it'll go to your homepage. So this is an example of my homepage, and so whenever someone tweets something, it'll come here to my homepage, and I'll know that they have sent a message out, and I can read whatever it is that they have to say. At the same time, anyone can follow me, so you have a list of followers, and that's people who have found you who are following whatever updates that you're making. There's a few details to this that I might mention. One is that there's a syntactical thing that happens where if you put the @ symbol in front of someone's name, it'll kind of send the message to them. It'll show a link basically in the feed that'll make you link to their account. And so this is the way that people can kind of send messages directly to people instead of just out to the mass group. So here you see all the people who have recently sent me a message, basically. There's also direct messaging and a bunch of other features to Twitter, but the main thing about Twitter and the reason why it's become so popular is because it is so incredibly simple. So Twitter is kind of controversial. Does anybody have any thoughts about Twitter?
I have a question about
Yeah.
the way you use it.
Yeah.
I noticed, I assume you've had a Twitter account for some time.
Yeah.
But you don't have that many followers or people you're following.
Right.
And I really limit who I follow and
Right.
who I let follow me.
Right.
But I see friends who have 2,500 followers and, they're following another 2,500. So it's a constant scroll of information you can't keep up with. What is your philosophy about following and followers?
Well, I'm still learning and experimenting with it. At first, I was much like what you just described, where I'm not interested in following a bunch of random people, and I'm not interested in too much in trolling and finding people out there. If people want to follow me, fine, But I also have had bouts where I would go through and delete people I didn't know because I wasn't really sure, why they would be following me and who they are and all that. But so one of the interesting things about Twitter that is fundamentally different from Facebook, which I know I haven't gone into Facebook, but for those of you familiar with Facebook, this is a big difference, is that on Twitter, you can have as many followers as want to subscribe to you, versus Facebook, where it has to be a one-to-one interaction. So two people have to mutually agree to be friends. You can't be following someone else and then them not follow you back. On Twitter, you can, and that creates this thing where it's almost like a popularity game. Okay, but this also makes it very useful for different organizations, for companies, for instance, for news agencies, things like that. For me, like you notice here, I'm following 104 people. That usually means during the day that I'm getting, I'd estimate probably around 20 messages, 20 tweets in a half an hour, I'd say. And it's getting to the point where it's almost unmanageable. But it's also not something that I don't read everything on there. And so I think as it gets bigger and bigger, it would become completely unmanageable. And so I'd like to keep it below that level. But all this, as far as philosophy goes, all of this stuff, I think it goes through a developmental process where when you first get into it, a lot of people, and this was my experience, where I was very skeptical and I wasn't sure about what the purpose was. And I was kind of afraid too about putting myself out there. I mean, this is a big thing, putting yourself and what you have to say out there, and anyone could get to it potentially if you don't make it private. And over time, I've kind of come to think that that everything is so public now that you can't really hide, and so it seems like a better strategy to manage what information is out there about you and what you say, and to kind of be an active player versus letting others perhaps say things about you or letting it all pass you by. So that's kind of how I've dealt with it. I don't know if that...
Can I interject
Yeah,
a little here?
sure.
Because I've had to deal with it a little more harshly. I'm going to backtrack a little. I, a couple of years ago, started getting really into RSS feeds, and I had an aggregator that would pop up every time something was new. And in a week flat, I suddenly realized that I wasn't going to have a life, that my life was happening before me by the hands of the RSS feed. And my productivity was zero. So I started cutting out accounts, and before long I realized that I just couldn't do it. And Kevin here is very disciplined. He's organized. He's got it all in a nice place. And I'm very much, kind of a loose, go with the flow sort of person. So when something stumbles across me, I tend to go following right behind it. And I realized that RSS feeds, for the most part, were dangerous for me. And I realized when I looked at Twitter that this was like an RSS feed on steroids. It's shorter, it's quicker, and it doesn't ever stop. And I question the validity of a lot of what's being said out there because there is a lot of fluff going on. And there's even there's a service out there where you can actually they aggregate all the foul things people say through Twitter, and somebody thought that was a funny joke, and a lot of people go reading it just to laugh to see what other people are saying. And I had to wonder. Most of my life in Web 2.0 is spent in the blogosphere, watching videos about technology and so forth, and reading articles and so forth. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a blog called Cranky Geeks, which is some former talent from the Tech TV days. They were discussing the validity of Twitter as a whole, and they really just got on the fence about it, and they were, the old school techies were, it's a whole waste of time. And the new school tech reporters turned around and said, but this is where I'm getting most of my journal articles right now. So it really is what you go looking for, and it's also what you bring to the table. And we get out of any of this social media. And discipline means a lot. Organization means a lot. Having filters in place means a lot. And if you don't, be forewarned, it will take over your life. It will, in a heartbeat.
Or you just won't get into it, basically.
Yeah.
It'll pass over you, basically. So I agree with all that. And just a couple points about this to kind of, I don't know, it's almost to sell you on it, or some of the reasons why I think this is important. For one thing, Twitter enables a really public conversation to happen, which is the strange thing, a very, very strange thing most of us haven't ever experienced before. But there's some profound benefits that can come out of that public conversation. And as long as all parties are aware that this is a public conversation, then I think that there can be some extreme benefits. So one of the things that I'll mention that's really helpful about Twitter that I've found useful and keeps me coming back is the ability to crowdsource information. So when I say crowdsource, I mean kind of utilizing this massive group of people to come up with answers for questions or to develop things that otherwise you would have had to go to experts to find the information for. You'd have to go to the right person. So as you develop your network on Twitter, I've got 184 followers, and so what I can do is I can ask a question via my Twitter feed, and this is kind of like asking 84 people this question, potentially. And I could get a bunch of responses to this question, and depending on who I follow, that can be really tailored to something that's very useful to me. So I might follow, I do a lot of web design, and I might follow some people who are experts in web design. Some people at K-State who are very good at web design doing similar work. I can ask a question on Twitter, and I don't really know who the right person is to ask this question, but there's a good chance that I might get a response back that was answering that question. So there can be that. There's also serendipity, a lot of serendipity that happens on something that's so quick and so simple, where people can be posting links and I have a problem, and it just happens that I glance over and there's a link to the problem I'm looking for. Now, part of this crowdsourcing idea is really empowered by the Twitter search function, which allows you to search all of Twitter, anyone who's making public statuses out there for whatever you want to search for. And right now, you see here on Twitter search, you have trending topics. So these are the things that have been tweeted the most often, the most frequently in the last couple of minutes, okay? So Twitter's really biased towards what's happening right now. And what most people are tweeting about right now is Susan Boyle, which I don't know, I bet you a few of you have seen this video that just got popular in the last few days, where there's this lady on the British version of American Idol, and she's 47 years old, and they go in and they think it's a joke, and then she starts belting out like the most beautiful voice that anyone's ever heard, and they're all completely surprised. And it's a moving video, and it's really popular right now, so most people are tweeting about that. So we can do a search on Twitter for Susan Boyle, and we can see what everyone's saying, and this will update real time. So the implications for this can be somewhat important. Twitter has proven now to be very, very important for whenever emergencies happen. So when the Mumbai attacks were happening in India, a lot of the people involved in that on the ground were tweeting to figure out what was going on, where the emergency was, who all was involved, all that kind of stuff. Same thing when the earthquake in California happened. The most famous example is this journalism student who was in Egypt, and he was arrested, and before they took his phone away from him, he was able to send out a text message to Twitter saying arrested. That's all he said, one word. And so all the people following his feed back in the United States at his university saw that, and they were able to quickly mobilize and got the university involved and got lawyers involved and made this thing, it became really public really quickly. And it resulted in him getting out of jail in less than 24 hours, basically, after he was arrested in Egypt. So those are a couple examples where this is actually somewhat legitimate. This can be legitimate. So yeah.
Did you say that you can make a Twitter private? So like if you're teaching a class, you can just have your class in there?
Sure. You can do that. You can lock down your profile so that what happens then it's not public, so people can't see it, and they have to ask you for permission to subscribe to your feed. So you can do that. You can also send direct messages through Twitter if you want, which are 140 character emails, basically. Yeah.
I'm pretty much a neophyte, and I sometimes I'm shocked by the number of people that follow and aren't followed. I enjoy it, but I think you're absolutely right, both of you. You're right, because I find that I have to choose which social media I'm really going to spend my time with.
Right.
But I think crowdsourcing, this is what teachers are doing in education. Everybody's got an emergency all the time, and so.
Well, and actually Twitter, the Twitter audio of education, there's actually a very, very active group of educators on Twitter, and they're a pretty important, pretty large group of educators on Twitter that are all talking about new media, how to use it, sharing links to different resources and all that, and I've found it very useful.
That there's, frankly, everybody talks about it, literally, you'll be getting ready for a presentation, it'll change in front of you, and then we put out a tweet to everybody saying, oh,
Right.
I gotta change it.
Right.
You get like 50 to 100 responses. I think that's the reason, that's the only reason that I really kind of enjoy Twitter for that purpose. I think you kind of have to choose your battles and what you want to use it for. But I do think for that purpose, I don't think there's any better.
And part of all this is supposed to be not just about what's happening now, but what's happening in the future. And one of the things that some people are talking about, and I can see totally as a possibility, is that Twitter search actually becomes a human-powered search engine. So it becomes even more important, rivaling potentially something like Google, whereas Google is using technology and advanced algorithms to process all of this information and to tell you what is most relevant to your search terms. Well, Twitter can work in a couple of different ways as actually having humans do that for you. So by searching what other people have tweeted, you can find what other humans have said are valuable on this topic. But then you can also do the crowdsourcing thing where you ask a question of, multiple people and they're kind of out there, and you find expertise where you didn't expect it. So, yeah.
Sort of have three disconnected questions. One is how hackable is this? How do you know you've got data integrity from the people who apparently are communicating with you? The second one is this multi-language? And then the third one is based on how people respond to you, because at the very beginning, Kevin, you said, how what we think of you, what you think, the meta perspective.
Right.
Do you change how you tweet based on the popularity of certain messages? So if people say, wow, that is such a cool idea, Kevin, because you said blah, 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 does that then change what you do and do not say?
To answer your last one first, I think definitely. I mean, it definitely changes it. You also, I think the more people that you follow and the more you're engaged in this environment, the more cognizant you are of what you're sending out there. And of the basic fact that everything you put out there is public and available to everyone. So instead of being able to contextualize, well, I'm in this classroom talking to these students, I'm in this room right now talking to you all, I only really have to worry about you all. Well, except for the fact there's this camera here, okay, and it's recording everything that's happening, and there's a good chance that's going to be published to the web. So essentially, right now, I'm not just talking to you all, I'm potentially talking to anyone, anywhere in the whole wide world, and not just now, but potentially in the future. And Dr. Wesch, who's my mentor and professor, coined the term, I think he coined it, called context collapse, to kind of describe this experience that we all have in this new environment where we're doing things here and we're not really sure what the context on the other end where they're going to be received. So if I post if I put a tweet out there, I have no idea who's going to be reading that, when, where, and for what purposes. So it definitely alters that. Integrity, you have no way of verifying who, let's say CNN has their own Twitter feed, right? You really have no way of verifying unless you contact CNN whether or not it is actually CNN who's doing it, So, people oftentimes are posting, in fact, CNN, there was, this just happened yesterday, it's called CNN BRK is the account, so it's breaking news from CNN. And that account's been active for like 2 years. It's got almost 1 million followers, which is like the most popular Twitter account. But it's not actually CNN whose feed it is. It's somebody else who's posting their breaking news. And just yesterday, CNN acquired that account from them. So now it is officially CNN, but there's no way of verifying within the system, whether or not. And then multilingual, I'm not totally familiar with all the limitations as far as character sets and all the different things that go into multilingual systems. I mean, I know that you can put other languages in there, and I think that most of it happens through English. But I also know that there are competing systems that work. Twitter's a very simple service, so you can prop up another service very quickly. I know in other countries they have ones that are very similar to Twitter, but are proprietary to their own language and all that. So, I don't because I don't have text messaging service. Like I don't pay for that, so I don't. But I have friends who have done that. And
I haven't done it yet because I'm certified on it.
yeah,
And so I'm wondering if you know anybody that's got it on their stuff, just so I can
yeah. I know one of my friends who had it, and he said that you could pick whose people you would want to update to your cell phone. So instead of getting your whole feed, you could say, well, I only really want to hear on my cell phone if this person or this person said something, you know. Okay, well, I think I'm way over time on the stuff I was going to show, and I'm only like a third of the way through, so yeah.
I had a question about how, like, maybe we could use Twitter in our offices. I mean, is it a great way to advertise programs to students, or
So there's a
have
couple
some applicability?
One of the simplest ways of using Twitter is just to syndicate. So it's just a way of getting information out there. So K-State, as you can see here, actually, they just tweeted something. So K-State News, it's been, they started an account like 2 months ago. And so whenever Media Relations has a new something that they're posting, they'll post that article here, and then I get it here in my Net Vibes, and so I know that there's this article, and I can check it out if I want. So you can just syndicate that information. That's the simplest way. But in an office context, it could work even further than that, where you can have these. So, for instance, we use listservs all the time, you know, especially in this institution, and that creates a huge problem on the email end. Everything's email heavy, and one of the things that you're trying to do through a listserv is have a public conversation, essentially, and that's something that Twitter is actually, you know, that medium is designed for. I'm not saying that, you know, listserv content should go out over Twitter, but I can see instances where it could be very useful if all the people in your office had a Twitter account and were tweeting, you know. I mean, it's not something that I recommend as like a policy, but if that were happening, I can see how it could increase productivity and make people more aware of what's going on.
It also depends on how you use it. The instructional designers used to formerly be with the Office of Mediated Education, and everybody was on ICQ, which is a little heavier of an appliance than Twitter, and actually made more sense in some ways just because everybody in that whole office sits in front of a computer. Most of them are programmers or web designers. And the three of us who are instructional designers are not much different in the amount of time we spend in front of a computer. And the reality is you'd think it was a time waste, but it actually would save more time. It was faster than picking up a phone. You could throw something out and query a couple of people with very little effort at all. Without ever having to dial a number or just seeing that they were in fact on their machine at that given point in time.
Well, and the biggest thing about that is that the person on the other end does not have to be actively with you. Like if you pick up the phone, someone else has to stop what they're doing and pick up the phone and answer it and talk to you. Okay, that's a really active situation that happens. And the liberation of instant messaging, which is what Ben's talking about right now, is that person, they could not be there for one thing. Okay, and via instant messaging, most people aren't expecting a response immediately. It's good if it happens. If it doesn't, when they get back to their computer and they do have a second, they'll probably respond. Okay, and it didn't take them having to listen to a voicemail and calling you back. And also, they could be in a meeting, and I have lots of people tell me about experiences where they're in meetings and their colleague's in another meeting, and there's a security question, and their colleague's the expert on security, and they're IMing back and forth during this meeting, and you know, providing answers to each other. And so you have this sort of thing that's happening where two meetings are actually talking to each other, and no one knows it, you know, but that's because they're on their laptops IMing. So.
And I've actually had that happen to
Right.
me just with text messaging on cell phones
Right.
too. I'll be in the middle of an appointment and someone who's in another meeting wants to ask a design question, especially when they're developing software. And all of a sudden I get this message right in the middle of everything. And they want an answer now. That's one of those things.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more about talking with students.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, is it a good way to advertise events and programs? I mean, are students really using this?
I think it's an excellent way, and because, well, students aren't really using this. I mean, they are and they aren't. So, there aren't really any natives in this environment. So the people growing up, you know, almost all of them are on Facebook, right? Mm-hmm. There's only a proportion of them are actively on Facebook. Very few of them even know what RSS feeds are. I mean, the percentage for people worldwide who use RSS feeds is only 11%, and that's the foundation of all this stuff, you know. So, I mean, we're talking there's still gaps to adoption. However, it's so easy to make a Twitter account, to publish 140 characters, that you can benefit anyone who happens across it. You know, for instance, the K-State News thing's a real benefit to me, and I don't know how many followers they have. It's probably only a couple hundred, you know, because there aren't that many people using Twitter. But that'll grow over time, especially now because it's getting popular. So I don't think it takes a big investment, and you can get a lot of benefit on the other end out of it, I think. So I'm just going to briefly mention one more thing and not go into it in depth, but a lot of all this stuff is there's so many different services that you can use, and there's so much going on that the struggle in most cases is to find some way of integrating it. And one service that is trying very hard to do that is called FriendFeed. So FriendFeed, what it does is you can set it up to, you create a feed basically of whatever you want to be in that feed. And so you can go to all the different services that you might use and feed in your information from those different services. So for instance, here on the right here, I have the list. So I'm feeding in my Twitter status, I'm feeding in my YouTube videos, I'm feeding in books, I'm feeding in my statuses and my images from Flickr, all these different things, and it comes in and it creates one feed. So it creates one RSS feed, integrates them all into one thing. And then within the service, it's the same type of thing as Twitter, where you can follow people, people can follow you. And then, so then you get a feed of not just these 140 character things, but you get a feed of what this person is doing, you know, whatever they want to share about they're doing all across the web. So if they posted a photo, if they changed if they got a new movie in Netflix, you know, to their queue or something, you can figure out what they're watching if they want to share that information. And then within FriendFeed, you can comment on it. So they have something in their status, and you say, hey, that's interesting, you know, I want to know more, or that's really cool that you're interested in that. And then you can have a discussion based on what people are actually doing online. So it's really integrating this stuff and making it potentially transparent. So it's not these separate silos and these separate communities and trying to bring them together. So it's something that's out there you might want to check out sometime. All right, I got to stop talking and move on to Ben, because he has things to talk about too.
Hi. I'm going to be actually peddling a different view. and a lot of that just comes from being a long-term technologist. And another of it is I sit on a fence, and I do it daily because this stuff is all very, very tempting to me. And I am a huge software hound, and I love media of every sort and type. And this is like walking every day into the candy store. And I have to be very, very careful about it because I have had a couple of binges from time to time. And so I really have to think twice about where I am in the candy store. But at the same time, it's part of my job to know about it. So this is kind of one of those funny things. I have, you know, a score plus accounts and different social media, and I have a hard enough time just keeping track of my passwords and my sign-ins. But I don't use many of them more than about a week or two, and then I disengage. Just because if I spend too long, I find myself getting into trouble. I find I have exceptions to that, and then I find other things that I come back and revisit. And part of that's my job. You know, just a month ago, I had a friend and a colleague who contacted me and says, well, how do you teach with Facebook? And I said, I have no idea. How do you teach? It seems a little fluffy to me. So I immediately started digging through the web and going through the blogs and doing all the things I normally do, which is kind of troll around looking for things. Not to be using the term troll as in being a negative griefer or something along those lines, but I'm just looking for stuff. And I come across a site in Germany where a teacher documents how they taught an entire class in great detail on Facebook. And I thought, this is great. I sent it to him. And then I started doing what you really have to do with anything you find on the web. I started researching each and every part of what he described. I discover half the applications he's talking about in Facebook don't even exist anymore. They're gone. And I realize that Web 2.0, which is what's driving a lot of this social media, and this little diagram I actually saw from Roger McHaney during the teaching retreat. He brought this up, and you can find this out there. And it looks all organized and everything, and I showed it to Kevin, and he said, why did they design it that way? And he started disagreeing with it, and when you start looking at it, some of these things don't even really exist anymore. And some of the things they're organizing in ways where they don't really work that way. They bleed over into other places too thoroughly. And one comes to a real quick realization that it's really more like this. And that's why I just kind of avoid really thinking about it in long terms, and I have to come to this realization that this is all kind of like being in a river, and you got two really good choices and one really bad choice. The really good choices is you can just float along, which is what I do, taking a little dip here and there and enjoying the flow of the river, getting a taste of a lot of things, taking in the views. Or you can be like Kevin, who's actively swimming somewhere. He's got purpose, he's really doing things, he's organized, he's thinking about the choices he's making with his media. Or you can make the third choice, which I occasionally do. And I get some idea, and I get fixated, and next thing I know I have a mouthful of water and I'm going down. Because it doesn't stop for anybody. In the next couple of weeks, there will be new social media being developed. There's new products being developed right now. There are new ones aggregating services that existed on old products. And there will be something to replace Twitter or something to replace Facebook. I mean, let's be honest. MySpace used to be the big thing. Now it's Facebook. Now what's going to come after it is a good question. And so really, I find you kind of have to just get into the concepts behind it. And I'm still hanging in Wikipedia because, I mean, truthfully, how many of you use Google? How many have your home page set as Google? Just out of curiosity. Yeah, you'd be surprised. When I start anywhere, I start with Google and I start with Wikipedia. And it's so old school and low tech. And yet, because I've gotten so practiced with it, I can really just start digging through the feeds and doing a lot of exciting stuff real quickly. I like this picture that's part of Wikipedia because these are all actually links. And you can just start moving back and forth through Wikipedia with the links. And it's all kind of interactive and it's kind of fun. And it gives you kind of a feel of what really is happening. Now, when Kevin and I started talking about this, we kept arguing with ourselves of what have we got ourselves into? This is too big of a topic. And I realized it's really like the composition teacher dealing with the student who has the topic. It's too big. And it really is too big. And yet here we are still trying to kind of work our way out of the corner with this topic that's really too big. So I'm going to kind of pull it around a little into what is my field, which is all about teaching and learning, which is kind of where we were hoping to evolve to anyway. The landscape has changed. Social media is changing it. The concepts that are being driven by social media are changing it. The ideas behind copyright are driving it, and things are changing. You're starting to see things like MIT OpenCourseWare, where knowledge is starting to become open source. And it's beyond just crowdsourcing and everything. Everything is starting to get out there. You're finding whole books. You're finding whole libraries starting to evolve out there. We're getting into this whole idea that education in the future may not be dependent upon the course. Students may someday not be paying for your lectures. They'll be paying for your mentorship. They will be paying for your advising and your assessment and critique. And that's what's going to become valuable. And from my perspective, and I probably should just warn this, Kevin and I are both originally anthropologists, as was Michael Wesch. I went to school at the same time with Michael. So we kind of pull back and start looking at this in terms of people and social interaction. And in an education point of view, we're seriously taking steps backwards. And this is, in fact, probably a good thing. We're getting back towards this kind of almost Socratic method of teaching. I keep thinking about a thing I heard several years ago from Professor Chris Deedy from Harvard University. And he was kind of paraphrasing Dewey, who said something to this effect at the turn of the last century, is that the time of teaching by telling and learning by listening and testing until we get it right needs to end. Now, that was true 100 years ago, and it's true still now, and we're reaching a point where things like social media are going to change that for us, whether we want it to or not, because it's getting too easy. You know, one person who puts something good out on the web for free has spoiled it for all the other people who just want to cloister it off into a corner, because they made it for the world. And the people who didn't jump in and help them make it better made it unattainable for the one person who's still trying to hide it greedily away from everybody and make you pay extra money for it. We are facing Pandora's box. It's open, and most people don't realize it. I always joke about living on the other side of the wire. Once you start getting into social media, you reach a point where you don't return. It becomes too easy and too comfortable, and that's where you're at. And it changes the way you think, it changes the way you seek entertainment, it changes your relationships. And the truth of the matter is the job I have now and the job before it are all based on relationships I built through social media. And was unique back then, 5 years ago, but now that's not unusual. And so things are beginning to change. You can jump in anywhere at any point in time. I like throwing out the next part just for memes, just to realize how much of this is kind of really even changing the way we seek entertainment. There are a lot of new terms coming out there, like memes and crowdsourcing, flash mobs. Any point in time you all are curious about any of these things. I'm going to throw out some as we go on. But I wanted to kind of throw this out there because this is kind of a significant thing. This is where cultural ideas are being transmitted through the web. Somebody does something, somebody else picks it up and redoes it, and then before you know it, millions of people are all in the middle of it. I'm going to kind of jump over and show just a video clip for the sake of showing a video clip. And this is actually from a video blog that's been around for a couple of years now. And that's their humorous joke about memes. And I'm curious how many of you know about this set. And so we'll just fire it off. And I need to turn on some volume.
Hi, I'd like to take some time and explain the phenomenon of lolcats. Lol, laugh out loud speak, can be quite intelligent. The best and the only way to learn lol speak is to understand its origin and study examples. The lolcat phenomenon started gaining momentum in early 2007 with the creation of the website I Can Have Cheeseburger, based on one fateful happy fat kitty photo. Although the website 4chan was the true innovator of lolcats as we know them today, I Can Have Cheeseburger was the beginning of the madness. Immediately, there were a few instant classics like Monorail Cat, Invisible Object, and Is a Cat a Day Yet? To truly understand the joy of lolcats, make your own. Oh, I'm getting hungry. I bought these great chocolate chip cookies. Hey, where are they? Oh, I knew you eated it, but you're just too cute for me to get mad.
I just kind of wanted to give you a taste of some of the lighter side of it. But the truth is things are changing just in terms of our language. A lot of your students are out texting and they're speaking in, LOL or leet speak, and you don't even realize it. And it's happening in instant messaging, it's happening in texting, it's happening in Twitter. And it's becoming pretty prevalent that new ideas, new thoughts, funny things are coming out there. But I also have to kind of warn you, and let me see if I can open my window back up. Come back here. Thank you. You have to be careful with this, and this is from their side. Because life is happening. There's not a particularly well-known term about this called the mirror world. And really a lot of this stuff is a mirror of our real world. And with it comes all the things that are part of our world. If you were talking in leet speak, that'd be RL, real life. A lot of this is happening in real life, so we have to kind of be careful, because once it hits the web, not only is it happening in real life, it's happening in this mirror of real life, and it's been published, and everybody can suddenly see it. So it's really kind of changing things, and you need to know where you're heading with all this, and I kind of wanted to go with this next step, so you realize how much of the world is changing. So I'm going to take it into video games, which is the next extreme element that we're going to all kind of fall into. This is from the Pew Research Center publications. This is the research they did on their American Life project. And you have to realize, how many of you play internet games? This is something I'm just curious. Out of this crowd, how many of you are honest enough to throw out? It can be just something casual like solitaire, or crosswords, or Sudoku. So it's just a very small amount. You know what's odd? If you start reading through their research about video games, there's about 33% of people who are 18 or older are actually playing video games, and it's pretty evenly split, with a slight majority for men. What they're finding out is the more education you have, the more likely you are to play these games. Also discovered from my generation, you don't talk about them because it's embarrassing, it's suspect to play. Now, flip this around. Those who are between the ages of 12 and 17, anybody have any idea of what percentage of them are playing games?
97.
Yeah, okay. We're reading somewhere. Yeah. So it is 97%. And it's a huge number. They've grown up in this. And it changes the way you think. It changes the way you handle media. It changes the way you approach problems and socialize and everything. Now, a lot of people are really, oh no, this is awful. Mm-hmm. But you also need to dig through the statistics. What you're finding is the people who are playing games and stuff and playing with social media and so forth along these lines are doing it at the expense of other things. So how many of you watch TV? Okay. The average American watches 28 hours of television a week. Do you realize that? The average online gamer watches 7.1. They're still spending 28 hours in recreation time, but they're interactively doing something else. And so it's not a passive pursuit. They're involved. They're building relationships. They're doing all sorts of things. And this is going to lead us into other things, and you don't realize that. Because the next step for social media isn't just going to be Twitter. It's going to go all the way, huge leaps and bounds, into the beginnings of things like Second Life, where you have virtual worlds, and people will be meeting in virtual spaces. And you're going to have things that are created, third spaces, where people go regularly, that are neither home nor work, but are social spaces where they go to meet all their friends. And that's where we're going to be heading. And some of that right now is Facebook, but some of it's in other things like massive multiplayer online games. And then there are people out there like Jane McGonigal, who's got a background in performance, a PhD in it, actually teaching out on the West Coast, who won a Webby Award for a game she developed online. And it's an alternate reality game. Now, not many of you know what an alternate reality game. I'd lay odds that almost maybe 1, 2. How many of you know? It's a pretty rare thing that you find people who know about it. It's a game that actually overlays the real world. You put on a set of game constraints and parameters on top of real life, and you play it to kind of make life more interesting. Now, she won this huge Webby Award and was given an award for it over at South by Southwest this last year, for a game called World Without Oil. And she's taking games to a whole nother step. She's doing it in an effort to crowdsource social change. And you're going to start seeing your students who are going to start seeing things like this, and they're going to go wondering why school, our colleges, can't be more like this. Why can't we do something that is more authentic? Why can't we have fun learning? And then we get back to my original point. The time for teaching by telling is coming to an end. So I'll play this a little bit real quickly.
Gas prices jumped to over $4 a gallon. There's very much police state going on in the streets now. And one way or the other, we're all in this together.
This is our local farmers market.
James, this is peak profit. Cal here.
We'll just kind of stop it right there. We're starting to see things like this where people are building things out on the web that are social experiences, that are proactive, that are intelligent, that are taking advantage of all the players, are taking advantage of all the participants. So we do get into things like crowdsourcing on a whole different new level. And my challenge is to kind of hope that I can refocus you all to start thinking in terms of education this way. And to think about teaching and learning in this way, because that's kind of where we need to push it. That's going to be the expectation real soon. If we keep with the discrepancy between what was and what is, you're going to eventually find students who don't care as much or who have a different set of values. And if you don't believe me, just dig around a little online and find about like the prevalence of cheating in courses. And then start digging down about the causes about it. And you start to have to ask yourself, are we a little bit responsible for this? Because we aren't really teaching in a way that makes it unimportant to cheat. We aren't teaching in a way that isn't, in a lot of ways, often rote. So here's our opportunity to kind of break the boundaries that we're used to and embrace these new tool sets. Yes?
This morning, the Wall Street Journal had a new book out on, I think it's called My Word, something like plagiarism and college culture.
Yeah.
We've got that in the library, by the way.
Really nice one. Had a good review, although, of course, the journal hates professors and did not think this was perhaps true, but they were saying that essentially, I just read the review, the kids now view not so much plagiarism as pastiche.
And we have to kind of give ourselves a step back. I think it's important to understand the nature of plagiarism, but the flip side is this kind of cut and paste culture where people are mashing things up and creating new things out of old things. That's going to be the prevalent culture here in a few years.
And I mean, the key part about that, the core part of that is this active participation. It's no longer receiving. Like TV is a medium that allows you to just sit back and receive. And what we're seeing is that that's not the way things are. So one of the things with plagiarism and with cheating, at least in my experience, is that most of the classes I took in college I found very little of the material of what we were doing in class relevant to my life. And when that's the experience, I feel cheated in my experience in that class, you know. And I mean, the difficulty here is to figure out, well, okay, yeah, things are changing. like, what can we do about it? And for me, the big thing, the one change that is irrespective of how much technology you're using, is starting to involve students as active participants in the course rather than as, passive receivers. And there are a multitude of ways that you can go about doing that. And there's a lot of inspiration out there, but somehow that shift has got to occur because the culture, and it's only getting worse year by year, it has already changed. And so, we're kind of catching up.
So really, your best thing is to meet it head on. And you have things like Creative Commons coming out of there, which really just kind of says, well, let's go ahead and create new things with the intention of it being used and reused and remixed and played with and mashed up, and put it out there and see what comes of it.
To me, you mentioned that maybe education, especially college education, might go away, or we need this new, restructure, whatever.
I don't think it's going to ever go away,
Right.
but I think it's going to
But-
change.
Right. That's what I was thinking. But I know you didn't mean that you physically all go away. But for us to be meaningful to this fast-changing world and with the cyber world, we gotta connect somehow cyber world and real world,
Absolutely.
But what I'm thinking is we gotta go back actually to fundamentals. Go back. College gotta become more focused on liberal arts and teach them fundamentals of the and philosophy and the anthropology, whatever and also how to communicate, the ethics. Those things we gotta focus on that, so that my students, when they encounter the cyber world, all this overwhelming information, pathways, they can actually filter what is good for them, what is not, and we gotta discipline our students better actually. So we gotta go back to the old times when college actually started. Why did they start? They wanted to teach people why we are here, what is this world about, what am I going to do with my life, really, to change the world. But somehow we gotta instill students new spirit, the old, when we first study university system or in a college system. So to me, it's hopeful that liberal arts and science and pure science become more important, because this can be all facade. It can be all superficial thing, just mechanism, mechanics. I don't know. It's like building something that it's like a mirage. Building something that can disappear really. Once computer shuts down. Once the electrics all goes away. Electricity goes away. So I don't know. We gotta teach students to not get confused. To do that, it's philosophy, it's ethics, it's communication. So to me, it's hopeful. But teachers are so behind with these things. We don't know what students see in this world, in this other world. And I really think teachers gotta be retrained, professors gotta be retrained, and we gotta know what to teach our kids. And I really think that there is hope. We might go back all the way in the ancient times where people start thinking, why are we here? Who are we? So that's what we should do now.
And I
want to be stay relevant.
And I wholly agree. That's kind of what I meant by we're kind of reverting back to the Socratic method.
Yeah.
It's all going to become inquiry. It's all going to become teachers pushing back to students, making them responsible for their own learning. And we're going to start seeing a lot of things that are more mentorship and apprenticeship. And you're not going to be worried so much about how many multiple choice questions you get right. You're going to be more worried about, well, what do you have in your portfolio? What can you show me that you did? And who did you do this with? And where did you get your information from? And it suddenly becomes more about solving problems. It suddenly becomes more about critical thinking. It suddenly becomes more about the process of learning and less about just memorization of knowledge.
So with all this thing, what can we do to get students to get interested in intellectually growing, and ethically, responsible, ethical and responsible and all that,
You got to focus on relevance. You have to make it relevant to their lives. And I don't know how you do that. You have to make it relevant. You have to figure it out. It may mean that you need to be online figuring out, where their culture is. You know what I mean? Like, you may need to be finding cultural relevance through finding out what sort of culture they're participating in. somehow you've got to make it relevant. If it's not relevant, I know, I mean, like I said, I sat through so many college classes I didn't feel were relevant. And
So you guys suddenly start dealing with real world problems.
I think that's a big key. I think that's a big key. I mean, focusing on real things. Yeah.
I want to know, I'm surprised at the age of my son. The only way my son will talk to me is text message. We have our deepest conversation is text message. I can't get him on the phone. My question to you is, what are your favorite social media that you use? And then second, based on you being you and your age group, and also working with Dr. Wesh, what do you think are the coolest things for you guys in the next few years as the kind of age group? Where do you see social media going for you and students of your age group?
Mm-hmm. Well, so the first thing, I think I'm definitely an early adopter with the technology stuff, and it's not something I was born with. This is something that I've developed over the years, just being interested in it. Like I was describing earlier, being very cautious when I first started getting involved in this thing. But anyway, so at this point, I can tell you my experience, but it may not be representative of the sample of people my age, because I think, so anyway, my favorite thing to do is to make everything fit together. Like, I hate that there are silos of social media out there, and that I have to be plugged into that and I have to be paying attention to that in order to know what's going on there and communicate with the people there. So in that regard, I hate Facebook because it's so much of a walled garden type of thing that you have to enter into to get anything out of it. And so what I enjoy the most is making them all fit together, and that's what I kind of try to show you with NetVibes, is how I'm bringing those networks into my own start page. And so there's this ambient intimacy that happens where I'm getting information from different social networks. There's different people on them, and they're all across a whole broad spectrum, but I'm doing it all in one place, and it's all integrated. Within that, there's one that I didn't show you that's called, it's like Dig for music. It's called The 61. And if there's one, like, it's called the61.com, and it's named after Highway 61. So it's like Dig for music. So anyone can publish music to this website, and you have to be the artist of this.
Am I in the right place?
So you got to spell it out.
Okay.
So anyone can upload their music, and then people vote on it. Basically, they can heart it, saying that they like it, and then the top music rises to the top. And this is a community that I was fortunate enough to get involved with and found out about
you already
when
have
I was
it
very
up.
young. I've been on it for like a year and a half, and I recently tweeted that I've listened to almost 25,000 songs on this website, and I'm on it for probably 4 hours a day on average, and this is over a course of a year and a half. So this would be the most successful match for my interests in social media, and one of the big things about this is that a lot of this is independent music, and so this site doesn't have the same problems that something like Last.fm, well, not Last, but like Pandora and a lot of these other ones who are streaming music from all of the major record companies, because this site and the people that built it are not making any deals with any companies anywhere. These are individuals who have the rights to this music that are putting it up there, and a lot of the music is Creative Commons licensed. And so, whereas a lot of these other sites like Pandora, a lot of people don't think they have a future because they're having to pay royalties for every single play of every single song. They're having to pay royalties on top of the bandwidth it costs to stream that music. And this site doesn't have to deal with the royalties. They just have to deal with a good user experience, the bandwidth to stream the music. So. Okay, and then the other question was where we see this going in the future. Well, I think one of the biggest trends is that it's going to be a lot less about this. Yeah, we're out of time, but I'll just say this real quick. It's going to be a lot less about this thing, this computer and this screen right here, and our desktops and all that, and it's going to be a lot more about our cell phones. So I think that's the biggest trend that's going to happen. And not only that, but it's going to be about the things that we don't think are networked will become networked, like ordinary objects out in the world will start to become networked in the sense that you'll be able to go to a store, and that product will have an RFID tag on it, and you'll be able to read it with your cell phone. So you'll be able to get information about that product. You'll also be able to get reviews that other people have seen that product. You'll get to search for competing prices for that product. You might be able to get to see a picture of a factory worker in China who made that product. and potentially the horrible conditions it was made under. You might see videos of documentaries about, so that's kind of where I see all this kind of integrating to where normal objects in our world are actually networked, and it's not just the stuff that's out here in the internet, but it's kind of ubiquitous among us. And yeah.
I have a comment to make. As I'm listening to you, as I see instructors struggling to grasp all this technology and Web 2.0, I'm thinking, what about the students who are international students who come here and they come with their own set of values and what education is, and then they come here and they're expected to do all of this, and then they go back to their countries and none of this applies anymore. I mean, have we ever thought about that? Stopped and paused? I mean, we're always running this race here, but have we ever thought what is the world doing with their education and how ready are our students?
It's true, but I mean, there's so much relativism involved with that in the particular person from the particular culture you're talking about. One of the interesting trends about technology in general is that it tends to, this is a fortunate situation for developing countries, is that it tends to skip. So for instance, in Africa, there isn't infrastructure like we have here. So they just skip over the ordinary telephone, and everyone there has a cell phone because they don't have the infrastructure to support the wires connecting everything. And so that's an example where the technology actually skips a generation. So it's difficult to predict, well, who's actually advanced. And we think about some of the Asian countries and Japan, the vast majority of internet culture, and a lot of you probably already know this, originated in Japan and originated with anime. I mean, that's where a lot of this stuff came from, and now it's in the United States and it's evolving in different ways. But it's definitely a valid question.
We're going to have to wrap up here real quick. I guess I can give you my 30 seconds. My most favorite doesn't exist yet. I'm waiting for it passionately because as much of this is exploding outward, there's a lot of it also imploding inward. And we're seeing things in terms of media that are going down the rabbit hole, where we're seeing a lot of virtualization. We're seeing synthetic realities, synthetic worlds being created. And a lot of people are going there. And there's a lot of appeal, and a lot of socialization is happening there, a lot of learning is happening there, and a lot of really exciting things happen. About a year and a half ago, I did a presentation on educational games, and I realized that for all the designing and all the teaching I'd done with them, I wasn't playing a lot of the more popular games at the time because I knew what would happen. So I thought, okay, I'm being a hypocrite, I'll start. Oh, that was a mistake. You end up like a rat on cocaine and nothing flat. Because the reality is, these are very addictive places. It feeds our inner monkey. They're fun. You get to meet new people. You get to have things in common. Diverse cultures come together. People are up 24/7. Whole cities worth of people up at a given point in time. And it's changing. Even the way we look at the technology is changing. And I kind of wanted to throw this out as just a last thing. Some of you may have actually seen it on YouTube. And it's part of the TED conference, and I'm going to pull it towards the end. This is Johnny Lee.
We actually did this.
Did you?
I want to quickly say that although it does do it for $50, there are some limitations of this approach, but you get about 80% of the way there for about 1% of the cost.
He's just repurposing Wii equipment for about $50.
Interactive whiteboard system as well.
And he's given away the software.
That's actually next to the TV, so it's pointing away from the display rather than pointing at the display. And why this is interesting is that if you put on, say, a pair of safety glasses that have 2 infrared dots in them, what these 2 dots are essentially going to give you is give the computer an approximation of your head location. And why this is interesting is I have this little application running on the computer monitor, which has a 3D room with some parties floating in it. And you can see that it looks like a 3D room. If you can see, like a video game, it sort of looks 3D, but for the most part, the image looks pretty flat and bound to the surface of the screen. But if we turn on head tracking, the computer can change the image that's on the screen and make it respond to the head movement. So let's switch back to that. So this has actually been a little bit startling to the game development community because this is about $10 of additional hardware if you already have a Nintendo Wii. So I'm looking forward to seeing some games with it. And actually, Lewis Castle, sitting down there last week, announced that Electronic Arts, one of the largest game publishers, is releasing a game in May that has a little Easter egg feature for supporting this type of head tracking. So in less than 5 months, it went from a prototype in my lab to a major commercial product.
So if you ever wonder about the power of YouTube and stuff, this is it right here. He was just showing off stuff he'd done in his lab with a YouTube video, and now, you know, it's going to be part of the market here in months. And he's getting invited to TED conferences and such. So it's happening in both directions, and it's happening fast. And if you're on the shore of the river, it's time to get wet. You really need to just get out there and just pick something and swim along and find things that are interesting for you and do something with it.